All right, how's it going, guys? This is part two of our Civil War video series. So we've seen kind of the first shots, but let's take a look at kind of some of the fighting that did happen in the Civil War and just take a look at some statistics between the two sides, okay? So just some quick Union stats here, right? 2.9, almost 3 million men served, and 1.5 million enlisted, okay? If you enlist, you have a 3-year draft period, okay? So you have to serve for 3 years. 630,000 casualties and 360,000 killed in action or died of disease. Disease was a big thing, especially fighting in the swamps of the South. Some Confederate stats, only 1.2 million men served, 800,000 enlisted for 3 years, 340,000 casualties, and 250,000 killed in action or died of disease. Okay, in war, always disease. All right, so let's create the armies. So how do you get from civilian to a soldier? Well, you can be young, single, white, and a man with no military experience, but very excited for battle, right? You want to go fight. That's number one. So companies formed locally, right? And a company is 100 men, and they fought alongside their brothers, friends, neighbors, very kind of Revolutionary War-esque, okay? Start locally, fight nationally. 3 branches of service. You can be in the artillery, okay, fire the big cannons, the infantry on the ground, 81% of the soldiers, or the cavalry, ride on the horses, right? Come in swift, come in strong. So let's say you look at some, income per capita. That means how much money is made per person by region as a percentage of the U.S. average, okay? So in 1840 in the Northeast, okay, making about $135, okay, a year that is. In 1860, a little bit more. In the West, kind of the same. In the South, you lost money, okay? One of the few times in American history where your income decreases during a time period, right? But in the North, it increases. In the West, in those kind of, Wild West territories, doesn't really do anything. They're not fighting a war. And then in the South, again, it decreases, as you can see. Just some more kind of income per capita by region as percent of the U.S. average, okay? So the North proportion of nation's population, 71 to 29% there. Proportion of nation's white population, 79% in the North, 21% in the South. Black population, only 13% in the North, 87% in the South. Proportion of nation's railroads, this is key here, all right? This nation's railroad is key. The North has 71% of the nation's railroad, opposed to the South's 29%, okay? More farms in the North, okay, 65 to the South, 35 acres, percentage-wise. Proportion of nation's manufacturer workers, again, we've seen all of this, but now there's some real striking numbers here. The North has 92% of the nation's factory workers, opposed to the South, 8. Proportion of nation's manufacturing output, again, it's pretty much per person. And then the number of factories and railroad mileage is just staggering, right? It's pretty much more than double railroad mileage. And look at 110,000 factories in the North compared to the 18,000 in the South. It's ridiculous. It's not even fair, right? Where are we going? Okay. So how do you recruit soldiers? Again, these types of, war is great. Come fight for your country. It works at first, but soon after the deadly first battle of the Civil War, Union had to start a nationwide draft. Okay, a lot of people started to enlist themselves, but then they saw, well, shoot, the South can actually fight. This can get dangerous, right? I'm out. Okay. So what does an army look like, right? So it's made up of the Corps, and the divisions, the brigade, and the regiment division. So the Union armies, Army of the Potomac, Army of the Ohio, and Army of the Cumberland. The Confederate armies, Army of the Northern Virginia, and Army of Tennessee. Okay. Now here's the thing. You're going to see this in the book, but one of the biggest differences between the North and South, the South had West Point Military Academy. Therefore, they had the best military strategy known to man at this point. Okay, the South had brilliant military strategy. However, you can't do anything with that military strategy unless you have something to do it with, right? So what happens? Conscription means draft. How do you draft soldiers? Well, the Confederacy started the draft pretty much at the on point in 1862. They had serious problems with supplying the men, okay? Not supplying men, but supplying the men, right? They just didn't have anything to give them. So many soldiers had no shoes or rations. They depended on the kindness of civilians. Also, one of the kind of grossest parts of war up to this day, the Confederacy, when they drafted, they said, okay, people are going to die next to you. When they die, get their stuff. Okay. The Union, right? They didn't need to start the draft until 1863, until those first bloody battles. Every able-bodied male, okay, male, not white male, 20 to 45 was eligible. Certain people were exempted, and if you were rich, you could pay $300 to someone else in your place. This was the poor man's fight, okay? So if you were a northern slaveholder, you could pay $300 and send your slave to fight for you. So if you get drafted, be like, here's my $300, someone else is going. I'm going to stay here and chill. So paying for the war, what happens, all right? This is big time here. We talked about the economic differences, but controlling the treasury is huge. So both sides kind of relied on war bonds and higher taxes, okay? You kind of buy a stock in the U.S. government, okay? And for the duration of the war, that bond increases in interest. And you're kind of betting on the side, right? You're betting on the side who's going to win. So if you invest in union bonds, you're betting that the union's going to win. So when they do, they pay you that money back plus interest. And then in 1862, Lincoln issued Legal Tender Act, which authorized the creation of 150 million greenbacks. And that's where we get the term greenback and green paper money like we do today. So the significance, for the first time, the American government was heavily involved in public finances, okay? More than the Bank of the United States, more than the Federal Reserve, okay? And here's the thing. The Confederacy tried to do the same thing. They tried to print their own money. What's the problem with just printing money? Inflation. It was worth nothing. So the Confederacy kind of shot themselves in the foot there by creating their own money. It honestly wasn't worth anything. Okay, so that's really the big thing there with paying for the war, creating the armies, and moving forward with this fight on both sides. Okay, hope you guys like this one. Stay tuned for the next.